Have you ever spent more time and energy trying to avoid making a mistake than it would have taken to recover from one? Or maybe you've experienced that internal jolt of dread at the idea of looking foolish, saying something wrong, or just not seeming together. That anxious dread is more common than most people think. Welcome back to Quieting Anxiety, a podcast from Excel at Life. I'm Dr. Monica Frank, and today we're going to explore a CBT technique called mistake practice. It's a form of exposure, but instead of exposing yourself to external fears like elevators or public speaking, you deliberately make small, harmless mistakes to confront the anxiety that mistakes trigger internally. Let's take a moment to mindfully think about a recent moment when you felt anxious about making a mistake. Or maybe when you caught yourself trying hard to avoid one, or felt a need to apologize for something small. Now take a slow breath and imagine, what if that mistake had actually happened? And what if the result wasn't as bad as your mind predicted? Just let that possibility sit with you for a moment. Take another breath and truly consider whether the mistake was a catastrophe or simply a moment of imperfection. Allow yourself to relax, breathe, and focus on the following. Today we're going to explore how facing small mistakes on purpose can help loosen anxiety's grip, and why practicing imperfection might be one of the most freeing things you can do. Just a quick note before we begin, mistake practice is a form of exposure, and deliberately making mistakes can bring up strong anxiety, sometimes more than expected. It's important to work with a qualified mental health professional who can guide and pace the process safely. What I share here is for understanding and reflection, not a substitute for individualized treatment. I'll start by sharing an example from my own life of how avoiding mistakes often creates more stress. When I was in college, I wanted to gain research experience, so I asked a professor if I could assist with his work. During our conversation, he said, "Of course you're familiar with so-and-so's research." I wasn't. I hadn't even heard of the person. But instead of admitting that, I nodded and said, "Oh, yes." That night, I stayed up in the library until midnight trying to learn everything I could, just to cover up the fact that I didn't know. What would have happened if I had said, "I'm not familiar. Could you point me to the most important articles?" He probably would have gladly done so. But at the time, the idea of admitting ignorance felt like a social and academic failure. That's the cost of mistake avoidance. We burn ourselves out trying to dodge brief discomfort, when in reality, facing that moment honestly would have been so much easier. Before we get into the practice itself, let's discuss why mistakes can feel so threatening in the first place. For many people, a mistake isn't just a mistake. It feels like evidence of failure, our incompetence, our rejection, or even danger. The fear of making mistakes or looking foolish can show up in various anxiety disorders. If you live with perfectionism, you may procrastinate, avoid starting projects because the fear of making a mistake is so overwhelming. Even small imperfections can feel like proof that you're not good enough. If you struggle with social anxiety, the fear is more about how others will judge you. Saying something awkward, stumbling over words, or wearing the wrong thing can feel like a social catastrophe, far beyond what it actually is. For individuals with obsessive compulsive disorder, mistakes may trigger intense distress and compulsions to fix or neutralize. A misplaced item or an incorrect word might feel morally wrong or dangerously irresponsible. And even in panic disorder, the fear of doing or saying something wrong can cause an internal spike in physical symptoms, racing heart, breathlessness, dizziness, that then become a source of panic themselves. For some people with anxiety, saying I'm sorry frequently, even for things others wouldn't even register as a problem, is connected to the fear of making mistakes. They might apologize for speaking up, for asking a question, for needing help, or even just for existing in a space. Often, this type of apologizing isn't about politeness. It's a learned safety behavior that aims to soothe anxiety and prevent imagined social rejection or judgment. But instead of reducing anxiety long term, it reinforces the belief that making even minor mistakes, or just being a normal human, is somehow unacceptable. Mistakes, when feared, become something to avoid, but avoidance reinforces anxiety, which is why in CBT we use exposure. We gently and systematically face the feared situation so the brain can learn that it's not dangerous after all. So, how does mistake practice work and what makes it effective? First, it flips the script. It's not about improving your performance or learning a new skill. It's about learning to tolerate the uncomfortable emotions that come with imperfection. You're not practicing how to stop making mistakes. You're practicing how to handle mistakes, how to stay present with the discomfort, and how to recover without spiraling into shame or panic. And over time, your brain learns that the feared outcomes, rejection, ridicule, failure, don't actually happen. Or if they do, they're brief and manageable and survivable. That's how we retrain the anxiety response. This kind of emotional relearning happens best when it's done in a thoughtful, step by step way. As with any exposure strategy, mistake practice works best when it's structured. You can start with a mistake hierarchy, a list of situations where you'd normally feel anxious about making a mistake, ranked from least to most distressing. Maybe at the low end is wearing mismatched socks where no one will even see them. Maybe at the high end is saying the wrong name in a conversation and correcting yourself in the moment. For those who excessively apologize or seek reassurance, instead of identifying situations to deliberately make a mistake, you identify situations where you would normally apologize unnecessarily or seek reassurance, and instead choose to pause. Simply not apologizing becomes the exposure. You might feel awkward or worry the other person thinks you're rude, but over time, you learn that your worth and acceptability aren't dependent on constantly managing others' perceptions. Letting small moments pass without overcorrecting begins to rewire the belief that you always need to fix something, even when there's no mistake to fix. Begin by writing down 6 to 10 situations. What are the social, personal, or emotional mistakes that make you cringe? Which ones make you anxious enough to avoid? Which just make you a little uncomfortable? Put them in order from easiest to hardest. Here are a few ideas that clients have used over the years, just to help you think about what this could look like. Drop a pen or paper in public and calmly pick it up without apology. Ask a question in a store that's clearly out of context, like asking for a power drill in a clothing shop. Speak slightly louder than you normally would, even if it feels awkward. Wear colors that don't match or clothes slightly out of your usual style. Pause longer than usual in conversation without filling the silence. Hold eye contact a moment longer than feels comfortable. Call someone by the wrong name. Gently correct yourself and move on. These are small exposures, but they challenge the idea that mistakes must be avoided, fixed, or neutralized immediately. What does mistake practice exposure look like? Once you have a clear hierarchy, choose a manageable starting point, usually around a 3 to 4 initially. But if you're familiar with doing exposures, you can start with a 5 to 6. Generally, something that causes mild discomfort should be your initial target, not panic. Plan the exposure to deliberately make a mistake without correcting it. Don't leave it to chance. Know what you'll do and when. As with all exposures, record your anxiety level before, during, and after. Stay mindfully present during the mistake. Notice what you feel: discomfort, awkwardness, the urge to fix. Resist the urge to correct or apologize unless needed. Let the discomfort exist without rushing to fix it. This type of exposure may include a certain time period to stay with the discomfort before using anxiety management skills or self-talk to reduce the anxiety. For instance, it may only take a couple of seconds to call someone by the wrong name, but the full exposure means to not try and reduce the anxiety for a certain period of time, which may be increased upon subsequent exposures. Finally, reflect afterward. What happened? What didn't happen? Did others even notice? The goal isn't to be okay with mistakes right away. The goal is to practice staying with the discomfort. The more you do, the less power it has over you. If your anxiety spikes during the exposure, meaning that it goes above your planned target, try grounding yourself with simple reminders. This is just discomfort. This feels big, but it's not dangerous. I can allow this feeling and move through it. I don't need to fix this. I just need to notice it. Especially for OCD, this kind of mindfulness during exposure is critical. Mistakes may trigger obsessive thoughts or the urge to mentally undo what happened. But sitting with the feeling without correcting teaches the brain a new response. To begin this practice, first reflect on how much the fear of making mistakes affects your life. Do you avoid, procrastinate, or excessively seek reassurance? Your task is to write down the situations that can trigger your anxiety or avoidance and put them in order. With your therapist's help, determine a starting point and how to best implement the mistake practice exposures. In addition, you can use the companion audio, Reframing Mistakes and Building Resilience, to help reduce anxiety after the exposure has been completed. Keep in mind that staying with the discomfort of the exposure for a period of time is important to the exposure process. Use the companion audio only to help with any residual anxiety that may spike after the exposure. Let's end with a moment of focus. Take a breath, release it, and picture a moment where you would normally avoid making a mistake or you would feel a need to apologize. Maybe you'd hesitate or overthink or stay silent. Now picture yourself allowing the mistake to happen. feeling the discomfort and choosing to stay with it. You breathe, you recover, you move on. Mistake practice isn't about being careless. It's about being free. Free from the idea that your worth depends on getting everything right. The more you practice this kind of mindful exposure, the less anxious you'll feel, and the more fluent you become in handling life's inevitable imperfections. Until next time, keep practicing, keep breathing, and keep moving forward.